The fluorescent lights of Lorenzo's bakery buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow that made my exhaustion even more apparent in the reflection of the glass display case. My fingers trembled slightly as I pulled my worn leather wallet from my purse, already knowing what I'd find inside. $15 and some change. Not even close to the 50 I needed. I'm sorry, Ms. Reeves. I really am. Marco, the bakery owner, shifted uncomfortably behind the counter. His sympathetic eyes made this even worse. I could maybe do a smaller cake? Something simple? I swallowed hard, feeling the ache of defeat crawl up my throat. No, it's okay. I need to cancel the order. My voice cracked on the last word. Jack was so specific about wanting Spider-Man. You know how 6-year-olds are. The truth hung heavy between us. I knew how 6-year-olds were, and Marco knew how single mothers struggling to make rent were. Mommy promised a Spider-Man cake. I'd told Jack just last night as I tucked him in, his eyes wide with excitement. My son, with his missing front tooth and perpetual cowlick, who deserved so much more than broken promises and canceled birthday cakes. I'll come back next week, maybe, for just a regular cupcake or something, I mumbled, stuffing my pathetic collection of bills back into my wallet. The smell of fresh bread and sugary icing suddenly felt nauseating rather than comforting. That's when I felt it. A shift in the air, like the atmospheric pressure had suddenly changed. The small bell above the door chimed, and the entire bakery seemed to hold its breath. The first thing I noticed was the scent. Expensive cologne with notes of cedar and something darker, more primal. Then came the sound of Italian leather shoes against the tile floor, deliberate and unhurried. I didn't turn around immediately, too busy trying to blink back the humiliating tears that threatened to fall. Mr. Castellano, Marco's voice had transformed completely. Higher, more deferential. An unexpected honor. How may I serve you today? I finally glanced over my shoulder, curiosity momentarily overriding my embarrassment. The man standing by the door made the small bakery seem even smaller. Tall, with broad shoulders draped in what was obviously a custom suit, dark hair perfectly styled. But it was his eyes that caught me, sharp, observant, the color of whiskey held up to sunlight. For a fraction of a second, those eyes met mine, and something electric and dangerous passed between us. I turned away quickly, grabbing my purse from the counter. The last thing I needed was to fall apart in front of strangers, especially a stranger who radiated power like this one did. I need to go, I muttered to Marco, already edging toward the door. I'd have to pass close to the newcomer to exit, and I kept my gaze firmly on the floor, counting the cracked tiles beneath my worn sneakers. But as I neared the door, a deep voice stopped me cold. The Spider-Man cake. How much? I froze, uncertain if he was speaking to me, but when I looked up, those amber eyes were fixed directly on my face. Something in his expression made my heart stutter. Intense, assessing. It's not. I was just leaving, I stammered. He turned to Marco without acknowledging my response. The cake this woman was ordering. How much? Marco looked between us nervously. $50, Mr. Castellano. The man, Castellano, nodded once, then withdrew a sleek leather wallet from his jacket. With practiced ease, he extracted several bills and placed them on the counter. The cake will be ready for pickup tomorrow, yes? Yes, of course, Mr. Castellano. Good. Only then did he turn back to me. Problem solved. Heat rushed to my face, a mixture of embarrassment, indignation, and something else I couldn't quite name. I can't accept that, I said, my voice coming out stronger than I expected. I don't even know you. One corner of his mouth lifted in what might have been amusement, though his eyes remained calculating. Dominic Castellano. He extended a hand. Now you know me. I didn't take his hand. That's not what I meant. Your name? He prompted, hand still extended, seemingly untroubled by my rejection. Ellie, I said reluctantly. Ellie Reeves. Ellie. The way he said my name sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. Consider it done. The cake will be ready tomorrow. Why would you do this? I asked, clutching my purse tighter, suddenly aware of how close he was standing, despite the subtle threat of his presence. I couldn't detect any obvious malice in his expression, just intense curiosity. A child should have a cake on his birthday. Dominic's tone suggested this was obvious. What time is the party? The question caught me off guard. 3 o'clock, but I'll have it delivered. He nodded to someone behind him, and only then did I notice the broad-shouldered man waiting silently by the door. A bodyguard or driver, watchful and expressionless. No, I said firmly, finding my voice again. Thank you, but no. I appreciate the gesture, but I can't accept this. Something flashed across Dominic's face. Surprise, perhaps. I got the impression he wasn't used to being refused. You would deny your son a birthday cake out of pride? He asked, his voice lower now, almost intimate. The words struck like a physical blow. You don't know anything about my son, or me. I know enough. His eyes traveled over my face, lingering on the shadows under my eyes, the worry lines beginning to form between my brows. You work too hard. You're exhausted, and tomorrow is your son's birthday, but you can't afford his cake. Anger flared inside me, hot and defensive. I don't need your charity or your judgment. For the first time, a genuine smile touched his lips, transforming his face from merely handsome to something devastating. Not charity, Ellie Reeves. Consider it a favor. One you'll return someday. The implications of that statement hung in the air between us, loaded with meaning I couldn't fully decipher. Before I could form a response, he turned back to Marco. Make it special, he instructed. The best Spider-Man cake you've ever made. Then he looked at me again, and something in his gaze made me feel both seen and exposed. Until tomorrow, Ellie Reeves. The bell chimed again as he left, his silent companion following like a shadow. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of a sleek black car waiting at the curb, another man holding the door open. Then they were gone, leaving only the lingering scent of that intoxicating cologne. Marco let out an audible breath. Do you know Mr. Castellano? No, I said, still staring at the door. Who is he? Marco's expression changed, becoming guarded. He owns several businesses in the area. Very respected. Very influential. The careful choice of words told me everything I needed to know. I'd lived in this city long enough to understand what influential really meant. The elegant suit, the men flanking him, the way Marco had practically bowed. Dominic Castellano wasn't just wealthy. He was connected. I walked home in a daze, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the cracked sidewalk of our neighborhood. My apartment building loomed ahead, a shabby 5-story walk-up that had seen better days. Mrs. Petrovich was outside, sweeping the same patch of concrete she swept every day, her arthritis-gnarled hands gripping the broom like a lifeline. Ellie, dear, she called as I approached. Is Jack home from school? With Mrs. Chen downstairs, I confirmed, managing a small smile. My elderly neighbor had taken a special liking to Jack, and often watched him when my shifts at the diner ran late. I'm picking him up now. Such a good boy, she said, nodding approvingly. So polite. You're raising him right, even without his father. The mention of Jack's father sent a familiar pang through my chest. 3 years gone, vanished with our savings and any semblance of security we'd built. Another reason why Dominic Castellanos' casually offered favor felt so dangerous. I'd learned the hard way that nothing comes without a price. I found Jack sprawled on Mrs. Chen's living room floor, carefully coloring what appeared to be a superhero of his own invention. Mommy, he exclaimed, jumping up to wrap his arms around my waist. Look what I made. He's even stronger than Spider-Man. Wow, I said, running my fingers through his soft brown hair. So like mine. He's amazing, baby. Mrs. Chen appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. He ate all his snack today. Very hungry boy. Thank you for watching him, I said, as I did every day. No trouble. Her kind eyes crinkled at the corners. Birthday tomorrow, yes? 6 years old? Jack bounced excitedly. Yeah. And we're having Spider-Man cake, right, Mom? The familiar weight of guilt pressed down on me. I opened my mouth, prepared to explain that plans had changed, that maybe we could do something special next weekend instead. But then I remembered Dominic Castellano's confident voice. "The cake will be ready tomorrow." "That's right, baby," I heard myself saying. "Spider-Man cake tomorrow." Jack's face lit up with such pure joy that my heart twisted painfully. What had I done? Accepted a favor from a man who radiated danger, who obviously expected something in return. All for a birthday cake. That night, after Jack was asleep, I sat at our tiny kitchen table, nursing a cup of tea gone cold. The apartment was quiet, except for the occasional rattle of the ancient radiator and the distant sounds of the city filtering through our thin windows. I'd picked up an extra shift at the diner for tomorrow evening, missing part of Jack's birthday, but earning enough to buy him the action figure he'd been eyeing for months. Just as I was about to head to bed, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "The cake will be delivered at 2:30. What's your address?" I stared at the screen, a chill running down my spine. How had Dominic Castellano gotten my number? I hadn't given it to him. I hadn't given it to Marco, either. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long moment before I typed back. "How did you get this number?" The response came immediately. "I have resources, Ellie. Address?" I debated ignoring him, blocking the number. But then I thought of Jack's face, the excitement in his eyes at the prospect of his Spider-Man cake. With a sigh of resignation, I sent him my address, then immediately regretted it. What kind of mother was I, giving our home address to a man who was clearly involved in something illegal, dangerous? A desperate one, apparently. As if sensing my thoughts, another text appeared. "Don't worry, just the cake, for now." Those last two words lingered in my mind as I finally crawled into bed, exhaustion pulling me under despite my racing thoughts. For now. As if this was just the beginning of something. As if Dominic Castellano had already decided there would be more to come. In my dreams that night, I saw those amber eyes watching me, felt the weight of an unspoken promise. Or was it a threat? And woke with my heart pounding in my chest, sheets twisted around my legs like chains. Morning came too quickly. I woke before my alarm, disoriented and still tired. The memory of Dominic Castellano's text messages fresh in my mind. For a moment, I considered texting him to cancel the cake delivery, to tell him we wouldn't be home after all. But I knew I wouldn't. Not when Jack bounded into my room minutes later, already fully dressed in his Spider-Man t-shirt, practically vibrating with excitement. "It's my birthday, Mom. I'm 6 today," he announced, launching himself onto my bed. I pulled him close, breathing in the clean scent of his hair, trying to push away thoughts of mysterious men and ominous favors. "Happy birthday, my brave boy," I whispered against his forehead. "I love you so much." "Enough to make pancakes?" he asked, his eyes wide and hopeful. I laughed, the sound chasing away some of the shadows that had followed me from sleep. "Definitely enough for pancakes." The morning passed in a blur of birthday rituals. Chocolate chip pancakes shaped like lopsided Spider-Man masks, opening the small presents I'd managed to wrap, new socks, a coloring book, and a set of toy cars I'd found on clearance, and decorating our tiny apartment with the paper streamers I'd saved from last year. Jack didn't seem to notice or care that our celebration was modest. At 6, he was still young enough to find joy in the smallest things. "When will my friends come, Mom?" he asked as we hung the last of the decorations. "Soon, baby. We still have a couple of hours." I'd invited 3 children from Jack's class, the ones whose parents I'd managed to befriend during school pickup, and Mrs. Chen and Mrs. Petrovich. A small gathering, but enough to make the day special. At 2:15, my phone buzzed with another text from the unknown number, from Dominic. "Cake en route. Will arrive in 15 minutes. I stared at the message, my stomach tightening with anxiety. I'd half convinced myself that the whole interaction at the bakery had been some bizarre dream, that the cake wouldn't actually materialize. Now I had 15 minutes to prepare myself for whatever was coming. I checked my reflection in the bathroom mirror, frowning at what I saw. Dark circles under my eyes, hair hastily pulled back in a ponytail, wearing my least worn jeans and a simple blue blouse that had once been nice, but now showed signs of too many washes. I looked exactly like what I was. A tired, struggling single mother barely keeping her head above water. The doorbell rang at precisely 2:30. Jack ran to the door before I could stop him. But thankfully he'd been well trained never to open it without me. "Is it my friend's mom?" Is it time for my party? His eyes were bright with anticipation. Let's see, I said, trying to keep my voice light as I approached the door. I expected to see one of Dominic's intimidating associates, maybe the silent man who'd been at the bakery. Instead, when I opened the door, I found myself face to face with Dominic Castellano himself. He stood in our dingy hallway looking impossibly out of place, like a movie star who'd accidentally wandered onto the wrong set. The dark suit he wore today was even more impeccable than yesterday's, his crisp white shirt making the golden tone of his skin more pronounced. In his hands was a large white bakery box. Ellie, he said, my name like smoke in his mouth. His eyes moved past me to where Jack was half hiding behind my legs. Something in his expression softened almost imperceptibly. And this must be the birthday boy. Jack peered up at him with undisguised curiosity. Are you the cake man? A smile tugged at the corner of Dominic's mouth, transforming his face in a way that made my breath catch. Yes, he said simply. I'm the cake man. I found my voice at last. You didn't have to deliver it yourself. I wanted to. His eyes locked with mine, and I felt that same electric current from the bakery, a silent communication I couldn't fully decipher. May I come in? Every instinct screamed that allowing Dominic Castellano into our home was a terrible idea, but with him standing there and Jack watching expectantly, refusal felt impossible. I stepped aside. Thank you, I said as he entered, forcing the words past the tightness in my throat. For the cake, I mean. He looked around our apartment, taking in the shabby furniture, the faded wallpaper, the paper streamers and handmade "Happy Birthday, Jack" sign I'd hung on the wall. I felt exposed, vulnerable in a way that had nothing to do with physical danger. Spider-Man, huh? Dominic said to Jack, who was still watching him with fascination. Jack nodded enthusiastically. He's the best. He can climb walls and shoot webs and fight bad guys. Sounds impressive, Dominic replied, and I was surprised by the genuine warmth in his tone. He set the cake box carefully on our small kitchen table, then reached into his jacket pocket. I brought something else for the birthday boy, if that's all right with your mother. He glanced at me, a question in his eyes. I hesitated, then nodded cautiously. From his pocket, Dominic produced a small, exquisitely wrapped package. Happy birthday, Jack. My son's eyes widened as he accepted the gift, looking to me for permission to open it. When I nodded again, he tore into the paper with typical 6-year-old enthusiasm. Wow! Jack's exclamation was breathless as he revealed what was inside. The limited edition Spider-Man action figure he'd been coveting for months. The one I couldn't possibly afford. The one he'd pointed out in every toy store window we'd passed. Mom, look. It's the special one with the light-up web shooters. I see that, I said, my voice faint. I looked at Dominic, who was watching Jack's reaction with what appeared to be genuine pleasure. How did you know? He shrugged one shoulder, a casual gesture at odds with his formal appearance. I have a nephew about his age. All the boys want this one. It was a plausible explanation, but something in his eyes made me doubt it was the whole truth. Had he researched us? The thought sent a chill down my spine. What do you say, Jack? I prompted. Thank you, Mr. Cake Man. Jack beamed up at Dominic, clutching his new treasure. You can call me Dominic, he told Jack, then looked at me. Both of you can. The doorbell rang again, saving me from having to respond. This time it was Mrs. Chen with her grandson, Kevin, who was in Jack's class. Oh, Mrs. Chen's eyes widened when she saw Dominic. I did not know you had company. This is Dominic, I said, the name feeling strange on my tongue. He was just delivering Jack's birthday cake. Dominic extended his hand to Mrs. Chen. A pleasure to meet you. Something in Mrs. Chen's expression shifted as she shook his hand. A recognition that made me wonder if she knew who he was, what he was. But she said nothing beyond a polite greeting. More guests arrived in quick succession. Mrs. Petrovich and the other children with their mothers. I noticed how they all reacted to Dominic's presence. The curious glances, the way the mothers straightened their posture and tucked hair behind ears. He had that effect, commanding attention without even trying. I should go, he said quietly to me, as Jack and his friends gathered around the table, eager to see the cake. "This is a family celebration." I nodded. Relief, and something that felt uncomfortably like disappointment mingling in my chest. "Thank you again," I said, walking him to the door. "For everything. It means a lot to Jack." Dominic paused in the doorway, his eyes searching my face. "And to you." The question caught me off guard. "Yes," I admitted, "to me too." He nodded, seemingly satisfied with my answer. "Enjoy the party, Ellie. I'll be in touch." The casual certainty of those last words followed me back into the apartment, where the children were now clamoring to see inside the cake box. With slightly trembling hands, I lifted the lid to reveal what was inside. The cake took my breath away. It wasn't just a Spider-Man cake. It was a work of art. 3 tiers of perfect fondant, with Spider-Man perched on top in a dynamic pose, the cityscape of New York spreading across the base. It was the kind of cake you'd see in a high-end bakery window or a celebrity's Instagram post, not something you'd expect from a local bakery for a 6-year-old's birthday party. "Mommy, it's the best cake ever." Jack's eyes were saucer-wide, his face glowing with happiness. As the party progressed, cake eaten, games played, presents opened, I found myself repeatedly glancing at the door, half expecting to see Dominic standing there. But he didn't return, and eventually I forced myself to focus on Jack and his special day. By the time the last guest left, Jack was sugar-crashed on the couch, surrounded by his new treasures, the Spider-Man action figure still clutched in his hand even as he dozed. I sat beside him, gently stroking his hair, my chest tight with a familiar mixture of love and fear. I'd do anything to protect him, to give him the life he deserved. But lately, it felt like I was barely treading water. My phone buzzed in my pocket, another text from Dominic. "Did he like the cake?" I hesitated, then typed back, "He loved it. Thank you." 3 dots appeared immediately then. "I'm glad. Are you working tonight?" My fingers froze over the screen. How did he know I worked nights? I hadn't mentioned the diner to him. Before I could decide whether to respond, another text appeared. "I'd like to speak with you. Alone. I can have someone watch Jack if your regular sitter isn't available." Alarm bells rang in my head. This man was suggesting he could arrange childcare for my son, a boy he'd just met today. The presumption was staggering. "I have to work," I replied curtly. "Mrs. Chen is watching Jack." "Where? What time do you finish?" I shouldn't tell him. Giving Dominic Castellano any more information about my life felt dangerous, like opening a door that couldn't be closed again. But something compelled me to answer truthfully. "Rosie's Diner on 9th. I finish at 11. I'll meet you there. We need to talk." It wasn't a request. I stared at the words, feeling as though I'd somehow stepped onto a path I hadn't chosen, one that was carrying me toward something I couldn't see. "About what?" I finally asked. "About the favor you owe me." There it was, the other shoe dropping. I'd known from the moment he paid for that cake that there would be a price. Nothing in this world was truly free, especially not kindness from men like Dominic Castellano. My hands shook slightly as I typed. "I didn't agree to any favor." His response was immediate. "You accepted the cake. You accepted the gift for your son." "We have an arrangement, Ellie." Fear and indignation warred within me. Who did he think he was? What did he expect from me? With trembling fingers, I typed, "I can't pay you back right now, but I will. Just tell me how much for the cake and the toy, and I'll find a way." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "I don't want your money, Ellie. 11 p.m. We'll talk then." I didn't respond, unsure what to say, how to extract myself from whatever this was becoming. After a few minutes, one final text came through. "Happy birthday to Jack. He's a lucky boy to have a mother who cares so much." The message left me unsettled in a different way. The simple acknowledgement of my love for my son somehow more intimate than anything else he could have said. I tucked the phone away and focused on waking Jack gently, getting him bathed and into pajamas, reading him a story before I had to leave for work. "Best birthday ever, Mom," he murmured sleepily as I kissed his forehead. "Did you see my cake? And my Spider-Man from the Cake Man? Do you think he'll come back sometime? I froze, my hand still stroking his hair. I don't know, baby, I said carefully. Maybe. Now get some sleep. I love you. Love you more, he replied, our nightly ritual, already drifting off. I slipped out quietly and knocked on Mrs. Chen's door, my mind elsewhere as I thanked her for watching Jack again and promised to be back by 11:30. As I walked to the diner, the evening air cool against my skin, I couldn't shake the feeling that my life had shifted somehow, that the appearance of Dominic Castellano had changed something fundamental. And at 11 p.m., I would discover exactly what that meant. Rosie's diner was nearly empty as the clock approached 11 p.m. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the chipped formica tables. I moved between the few remaining customers, refilling coffee cups and clearing plates with mechanical efficiency, my mind elsewhere. With each tick of the clock, my anxiety mounted. You look like you've seen a ghost, honey, Dottie, the other night waitress, remarked as we passed each other behind the counter. At 62, she'd been serving at Rosie's longer than I'd been alive and missed nothing. Everything okay with Jack's birthday? It was great, I said, forcing a smile. Just tired. She patted my arm sympathetically. Single mom's curse. Always tired. Her gaze shifted to something beyond my shoulder, and her expression changed. Well, hello there, handsome. Sit anywhere you like. I turned, already knowing who I'd see. Dominic Castellano stood in the entrance, somehow making our dingy diner look even shabbier by comparison. He'd changed from his formal suit into dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that probably cost more than my monthly rent, but he still radiated that unmistakable aura of power. Several heads turned as he moved through the restaurant, his eyes finding mine immediately. He chose a booth in the far corner, partially secluded from the rest of the dining area. As he sat, I noticed the black car idling outside, the silhouette of a driver visible through the windshield. Never alone, I thought. Even here, even now. Friend of yours? Dottie asked, eyebrows raised suggestively. No, I said too quickly. Just someone I met recently. Well, he's looking at you like he knows you. She winked. And if he doesn't, looks like he wants to. Heat crept up my neck. I'll take his order. I approached his table with forced composure, notepad in hand as if he were just another customer. What can I get you? Dominic looked up at me, those amber eyes reflecting the diner's neon lights. Coffee. Black. A pause. And your company, when you're finished with your shift. I glanced at the clock. 10 minutes until my official end time. I need to get home to my son. Mrs. Chen is watching him until 11:30. That gives us time to talk. At my startled expression, he added, You mentioned it earlier, remember? I did remember, but the fact that he'd retained that detail unnerved me. I nodded stiffly and went to fetch his coffee, feeling his eyes on me the entire time. When I returned with his cup, he gestured to the seat across from him. Join me. I'm still working. He glanced around the nearly empty diner. I think they can spare you for a few minutes. As if on cue, Dottie appeared beside me. Go ahead, honey. I'll cover your tables. She smiled at Dominic with open curiosity. I've got things handled out here. Trapped, I slid reluctantly into the booth, setting my order pad on the table like a shield. Dominic watched me with an intensity that made my skin prickle, as if he were cataloging every detail of my appearance. How was the rest of the party? He asked, his voice low and smooth. The question was so normal, so unexpected, that it momentarily disarmed me. It was good. Jack had fun. All the kids were impressed by the cake. A small smile played at the corner of his mouth. I'm glad. We fell into an uncomfortable silence. I fidgeted with my pen, painfully aware of the contrast between us, his casual elegance and my rumpled waitress uniform, smelling of fryer oil and cheap coffee. Finally, I gathered my courage and asked the question that had been haunting me all evening. What kind of favor do you expect from me? Dominic took a slow sip of his coffee before answering. I want you to have dinner with me tomorrow night. I blinked, certain I'd misheard him. Dinner? That's it? For now. His eyes held mine, unreadable and intent. Is that so surprising? Yes, I admitted. Men like you don't buy birthday cakes and toys for strange women's children just to get a dinner date. One eyebrow lifted slightly. Men like me? And what kind of man do you think I am, Ellie? I lowered my voice, leaning forward slightly. I'm not naive. I know who you are. What you are. Marco's reaction at the bakery, the car, the bodyguards, you're connected. Probably dangerous. Instead of being offended, Dominic seemed amused. And yet here you are, sitting across from me. Because I don't have a choice, I said, frustration seeping into my tone. You've made that clear. His expression hardened slightly. I've never forced anyone to do anything against their will, Ellie. If you want to walk away right now, consider the debt paid. The cake, the toy, they were gifts, not obligations. The offer was tempting. I could get up, finish my shift, and never see Dominic Castellano again. But something kept me rooted to my seat, curiosity perhaps, or something more dangerous. Why me? I asked finally. Why did you help us yesterday? You don't know me. Dominic was silent for a long moment, his fingers lightly tracing the rim of his coffee cup. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer. I was 7 when my mother left us. My father, my sister, and me. She couldn't handle my father's business. The life. He paused. My birthday was 2 weeks after she left. My father was too angry, too bitter to remember. No cake, no celebration. The confession startled me. It was too personal, too vulnerable from a man who seemed carved from stone. I'm sorry, I said quietly. That must have been painful. He shrugged, but the casual gesture didn't match the intensity in his eyes. When I saw you in that bakery, trying to cancel your son's cake, it triggered something. A memory. I acted on impulse. And now? I asked. What is this? What do you really want from me? Right now? Just dinner. He leaned forward slightly. I find you intriguing, Ellie Reeves. A woman who would refuse charity even when it means disappointing her child, who looks at me without the fear or greed I usually see. I want to know more about you. My face warmed under his scrutiny. There's nothing intriguing about me. I'm just trying to survive. That's where you're wrong. His voice dropped lower, sending an involuntary shiver down my spine. Survival takes strength, and strength is always intriguing. The clock on the wall showed 11:05. My shift was officially over, but I felt rooted to my seat, caught in the gravity of Dominic's presence. I have a proposition for you, he said abruptly, beyond dinner. My guard immediately went back up. What kind of proposition? I need someone I can trust at one of my legitimate businesses, my restaurant Castellanos. The hostess position just opened up. Hours from 5 to 11, Tuesday through Saturday. The pay is significantly better than what you make here. I stared at him, speechless. Was he offering me a job? Why would you trust me? I asked finally. You don't know me either. I'm a good judge of character, he replied simply. And I've made some inquiries. You've worked here 3 years without missing a shift. Before that, you were at the hotel downtown until it closed. You pay your rent on time despite your limited income. You're reliable, hardworking, and discreet. The fact that he'd investigated me should have terrified me, but strangely, it didn't. What terrified me was the lifeline he was offering. A better job, better pay, better hours that would let me spend more time with Jack. What's the catch? I asked, because there had to be one. Dominic's lips curved into a slight smile. Dinner first. Tomorrow night, 8 p.m. I'll send a car for you and arrange for childcare. We can discuss the details then. I can find my own childcare, I said automatically. The thought of Dominic arranging someone to watch Jack making me deeply uncomfortable. He inclined his head in acknowledgement. As you wish, but the car is non-negotiable. I'll send it at 7:30. I should have refused. Should have stood up, thanked him for the birthday gifts, and walked away. But the thought of continuing as we were, barely scraping by, working exhausting hours for minimal pay, always one emergency away from disaster, made the decision for me. Okay, I said, the word hanging between us like a contract. Dinner tomorrow. Something flashed in Dominic's eyes. Satisfaction, perhaps, or triumph. He reached into his pocket and placed a business card on the table. My personal number, in case anything comes up. As I took the card, our fingers brushed, and I felt that same electric current from the bakery, stronger now. I pulled back quickly, tucking the card into my uniform pocket. I should go, I said, suddenly desperate for fresh air, for distance from this man who was quickly becoming a disruption to my carefully controlled life. Dominic nodded, standing as I did. I'll walk you home. That's not necessary. It's late, and your neighborhood isn't the safest. His tone made it clear this wasn't open for discussion. My driver will follow, and I'll take a cab back after I see you safely inside. The idea of Dominic walking me home, seeing where Jack and I lived, felt like another boundary being crossed, but I was also acutely aware of the two young men who'd been hanging around the corner of my block lately, their eyes following me each time I passed. Having Dominic beside me tonight would ensure I got home safely. Fine, I conceded, grabbing my coat from the staff room and saying goodnight to Dottie, who gave me a knowing look as we left. The night air was cool against my skin as we stepped outside, the street quiet except for the distant sounds of traffic. Dominic's driver pulled the car over, but Dominic waved him back, indicating we would walk. The black sedan fell into a slow crawl behind us as we moved down the sidewalk. We walked in silence for a block, the space between us charged with unspoken questions. I was acutely aware of his presence beside me, the faint scent of his cologne, the measured rhythm of his steps matching mine, the way his shoulder occasionally brushed against mine when the sidewalk narrowed. How long have you been a single mother? He asked finally, breaking the silence. 3 years, I replied, surprising myself with my honesty. Jack's father left when he was 3. And he provides no support? The bitterness I tried so hard to suppress around Jack crept into my voice. He emptied our bank account and disappeared. No child support, no contact, nothing. Dominic's expression darkened. What's his name? Why? I asked, suddenly alarmed by the dangerous edge in his tone, just curious. But there was nothing casual about the way he said it. It doesn't matter, I said firmly. We're better off without him. We turned onto my block, and I noticed with relief that the corner where the young men usually loitered was empty tonight. As we approached my building, I could see Mrs. Petrovich peering through her curtains at us, no doubt cataloging every detail to share with the other tenants tomorrow. This is me, I said, stopping in front of my building's entrance. Thank you for walking me home. Instead of saying goodnight, Dominic reached out slowly, giving me plenty of time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers were warm against my skin, the touch feather-light, but sending shockwaves through my body. Until tomorrow, Ellie, he said softly, his eyes holding mine. I couldn't speak, couldn't move, caught in whatever this was between us. Finally, I managed to nod and turn toward the door, fumbling slightly with my keys. I could feel his eyes on me as I entered the building, and only when the door closed behind me did I release the breath I'd been holding. Mrs. Chen was dozing on my couch when I entered my apartment, Jack asleep in his room down the hall. She woke immediately, blinking up at me. You're home, she said, gathering her things. Jack went to sleep quickly, still tired from party. Thank you for staying with him, I said, walking her to the door. How much do I owe you tonight? She waved me off. No charge. Birthday present for Jack. I tried to protest, but she was already heading down the hall to her own apartment. With a sigh, I locked the door and leaned against it, my mind racing. What had I gotten myself into? Dinner with Dominic Castellano tomorrow night. Possibly a new job at his restaurant. It was moving too fast, spinning out of control. And yet, I couldn't deny the flutter of excitement beneath my anxiety. The dangerous thrill of being seen, truly seen, by someone like him. I checked on Jack before getting ready for bed, standing in his doorway and watching the gentle rise and fall of his chest. He'd fallen asleep clutching the Spider-Man action figure Dominic had given him. My brave, beautiful boy, who deserved so much more than I could give him on my own. Was that why I'd agreed to dinner? Not because of any attraction to Dominic, but because of what he could offer Jack. Better opportunities, security, stability. I wasn't sure I could trust my own motivations anymore. All I knew was that tomorrow night would change everything, for better or worse. And despite all my instincts screaming caution, I was going to meet Dominic Castellano for dinner and hear what he had to propose. As I crawled into bed, my phone buzzed with a text. Home safe? I stared at the message, wondering how many women had received similar texts from him over the years. How many had found themselves unexpectedly drawn into his orbit, unable or unwilling to escape. Yes. Thank you for walking me home. His response came immediately. Sleep well, Ellie. Dream of better days ahead. I set the phone aside, but his words followed me into sleep. Better days ahead. It was a promise I desperately wanted to believe, even if it came from the most dangerous man I'd ever met. The next day passed in a blur of mundane tasks and mounting anxiety. I took Jack to school, cleaned our apartment, did laundry at the coin-operated machines in the basement, all while Dominic's dinner invitation loomed like a storm on the horizon. By late afternoon, I was standing in front of my closet, staring at the pitiful selection of clothes with growing despair. What did one wear to dinner with a mafia boss? I had exactly one dress that could be considered appropriate for a nice restaurant. A simple black wrap dress I'd bought years ago for job interviews. It was modest and slightly dated, but it was the best I had. Mrs. Petrovich had eagerly agreed to watch Jack for the evening, her eyes sparkling with barely contained curiosity when I mentioned I had a dinner engagement. I'd been deliberately vague about who I was meeting, but the way she kept glancing at her window, which had a clear view of the street, told me she was hoping for another glimpse of the handsome stranger who'd walked me home last night. Don't worry about time, she'd insisted. Jack can sleep in my apartment if you are very late. The suggestive tone made my face burn, but I'd thanked her and promised I wouldn't be out all night. At 6:45, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, critically assessing my appearance. I'd applied a light layer of makeup, mascara, blush, a touch of neutral eyeshadow, and the only lipstick I owned, a soft rose color. My hair fell in loose waves around my shoulders, still damp from the shower. The black dress hugged my figure more than I remembered, revealing curves that my usual uniform of jeans and t-shirts concealed. "Mom, you look pretty," Jack said from the doorway, his head tilted to one side. "Are you going on a date?" The innocent question made me freeze. "No, sweetie, just dinner with a friend." "Is it the cake man?" he asked, his eyes lighting up. "Dominic?" I knelt down to his level, smoothing his unruly hair. "Yes, actually. How did you guess?" Jack shrugged with a child's simple logic. "You're wearing lipstick, and you smile different when you talk about him." I blinked, startled by my son's perception. Had I been smiling when I mentioned Dominic? "It's just a thank you dinner," I explained carefully. "For the cake and your Spider-Man. Can I come next time?" Jack asked, clutching the action figure that had barely left his hands since yesterday. "We'll see," I said noncommittally. "Now, be good for Mrs. Petrovich, okay? I've packed your pajamas and toothbrush in case you fall asleep there." "I know, Mom." He rolled his eyes with the exaggerated patience of a child who thinks they're being treated like a baby. "I'm 6 now. I'm big," I laughed, pulling him into a tight hug. "Yes, you are. The biggest." At precisely 7:30, my phone buzzed with a text. "Car is downstairs." I took a deep breath, grabbed my purse, and walked Jack next door to Mrs. Petrovich's apartment. After a final kiss on his forehead and a promise to be back before he knew it, I made my way down the stairs on trembling legs. The car waiting at the curb was the same sleek black sedan I'd seen before. As I approached, the driver, a different man than the one who'd accompanied Dominic to the bakery, stepped out and opened the rear door for me. "Ms. Reeves," he said with a respectful nod. "Mr. Castellano is expecting you." The interior of the car was luxurious, the leather seats soft and spotless. As we pulled away from the curb, I caught a glimpse of Mrs. Petrovich's curtains twitching, her silhouette visible behind the glass. By tomorrow, the entire building would know I'd left in a fancy car with a handsome stranger. We drove in silence through the city, moving from my rundown neighborhood into increasingly affluent areas. When we finally stopped, it was in front of a restaurant I'd only ever heard about, Bella Luna, one of the most exclusive Italian establishments in the city, where reservations were reportedly booked months in advance. "Mr. Castellano is waiting inside," the driver informed me as he opened my door. "The maitre d' will show you to his table." I stepped out of the car, suddenly acutely aware of my worn black heels and simple dress. The restaurant's facade was elegant but understated, a discreet brass plaque, the only indication of the exclusivity within. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the heavy door and stepped inside. The interior was a study in refined luxury. Dim lighting from crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, fine china, and the soft murmur of conversation, punctuated by the occasional clink of glasses. The maitre d', an older man with salt and pepper hair and an impeccable suit, approached me immediately. "Ms. Reeves?" When I nodded, he gave me a warm smile. "Mr. Castellano is expecting you. Please, follow me." He led me through the main dining area, where I felt the curious gazes of other diners following us. I kept my chin up, fighting the insecurity that threatened to overwhelm me. Dominic was seated at a corner table, partially secluded by an ornate wooden screen. He rose as I approached, and my breath caught in my throat. He wore a tailored navy suit that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders, a crisp white shirt open at the collar, no tie. The formal attire should have created distance, but instead, it only emphasized his raw physicality. "Ellie," he said, his voice like warm whiskey in the dim light, "you look beautiful." The compliment, delivered with such sincerity, sent heat rushing to my face. "Thank you," I managed, as the maitre d' pulled out my chair. Dominic waited until I was seated before taking his own seat again. "I took the liberty of ordering wine," he said, gesturing to an open bottle and an ice bucket beside the table. "A Barolo from my family's region in Italy. But if you'd prefer something else, wine is fine," I said, though alcohol was a luxury I rarely indulged in. I watched as he poured a deep red liquid into my glass, the movement of his hands graceful and controlled. "To new beginnings," he said, raising his glass slightly. I hesitated before touching my glass to his. "Is that what this is?" His eyes met mine over the rim of his glass. "That depends on you." The wine was rich and complex, unlike anything I'd ever tasted. I set my glass down carefully, determined to keep my wits about me. "You mentioned a job offer." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Straight to business. I admire that." He leaned back slightly in his chair. "As I mentioned, the hostess position at Castellanos is available, 5 to 11, Tuesday through Saturday. The base salary is significantly higher than what you make at the diner, plus you'd receive a share of the tips." He named a figure that made me nearly choke on my wine, almost triple what I currently earned. "That's very generous," I said cautiously. "Too generous for a hostess position." "The restaurant does exceptionally well," he replied with a casual shrug, "and I value loyalty and discretion." "Which brings me back to my question from last night," I said, meeting his gaze directly. "Why me? Why offer this to someone you barely know?" Dominic studied me for a moment, his amber eyes unreadable in the dim light. "I told you. I'm a good judge of character. There has to be more to it than that." He took another sip of wine, considering his words carefully. "When I was a child, after my mother left, a woman named Sophia worked as our housekeeper. She was a single mother too, struggling to raise her son on her own. My father paid her well, but more importantly, he respected her, gave her dignity in her work." He paused. "She was the only adult in my life who showed me consistent kindness during those years." The personal revelation surprised me again. It seemed at odds with the powerful, dangerous man sitting across from me. "What happened to her?" I asked softly. "She worked for my family until her son finished college. Then my father helped them start a small business of their own." A genuine smile touched his lips. "They still send a Christmas card every year." I wanted to believe this story, wanted to believe there was compassion beneath Dominic's intimidating exterior. But years of hard lessons had taught me to be wary of men offering salvation. "And that's all this is?" I pressed. "You offering me a better job out of the goodness of your heart, because I remind you of your housekeeper?" Something flashed in his eyes, irritation, perhaps, or amusement at my persistence. "Not quite." He leaned forward slightly. "You intrigue me, Ellie. Your strength, your independence. The way you look at me without flinching, without the fear or obsequiousness I've grown accustomed to." His voice dropped lower. "And yes, I find you attractive. Very attractive. But the job offer stands regardless of how you respond to that attraction." The blunt admission sent a rush of heat through me that had nothing to do with the wine. No man had looked at me the way Dominic did in years, like I was desirable, fascinating, worthy of pursuit. I have a son, I said, as if he might have forgotten this crucial detail. He's my priority, always. As he should be, Dominic agreed. I respect that. The hours at Castellanos would actually give you more time with him than your current schedule. You'd be home during the day while he's at school, and Mrs. Chen could watch him in the evenings. You'd have Sundays and Mondays off completely. He'd thought of everything, considered my life and its complications, found solutions that addressed my concerns before I could even voice them. It was simultaneously thoughtful and unnerving. What about the restaurant's other owner? I asked. Your father? A shadow crossed Dominic's face. My father passed away 2 years ago. I'm the sole owner now. I'm sorry for your loss, I said automatically. He acknowledged the sentiment with a slight incline of his head. The restaurant is mine, as are several other legitimate businesses in the city. Whatever else you may have heard about me or my family, I keep those enterprises separate and above board. The implicit confirmation of his criminal connections should have sent me running for the door. Instead, I found myself asking, and what exactly would my responsibilities be? Beyond the normal hostess duties? Nothing sinister, if that's what you're concerned about. His lips curved into a half-smile. Greet guests, manage reservations, ensure the dining experience runs smoothly. The only additional requirement is absolute discretion about the other patrons. Many of our regulars value their privacy. In other words, don't gossip about which city officials or celebrities might be dining with which companions. It seemed reasonable enough. When would you need an answer? I asked, buying myself time to think. Tonight would be preferable, he said. The position needs to be filled quickly. The waiter appeared then with our first course, a delicate arrangement of prosciutto, figs, and aged cheese that made my mouth water. As we ate, the conversation shifted to lighter topics. Dominic asked about Jack, listening with genuine interest as I shared stories of my son's recent adventures in kindergarten. I found myself relaxing incrementally, drawn in by his attentiveness and unexpected humor. By the time our main courses arrived, handmade pasta with truffle sauce for me, osso buco for him, I was surprised to find myself enjoying his company. Dominic was intelligent, well-traveled, and a good listener. In another life, in other circumstances, this might have been just a pleasant dinner date between two people attracted to each other. But the reality of who he was hovered between us like an unspoken third presence at the table. Occasionally, I would catch glimpses of it, the way the restaurant staff treated him with a deference bordering on fear, how his eyes constantly scanned the room, assessing the subtle bulge of a weapon beneath the jacket of the man seated alone at the bar, clearly one of Dominic's guards. You're thinking too hard, Dominic observed as our plates were cleared. I can see the wheels turning. I met his gaze. I'm trying to reconcile the man across from me with the reputation that precedes you. And what reputation is that exactly? He asked, a dangerous edge beneath the casual tone. I chose my words carefully, that you're powerful, connected, that crossing you would be unwise. He didn't deny it. Instead, he reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine in a touch that sent electricity up my arm. I protect what's mine, Ellie, fiercely. But I'm not the monster some would paint me to be. The possessive undercurrent in his words should have alarmed me. Instead, I found myself wondering what it would be like to be counted among the things Dominic Castellano considered his. To be protected, rather than always being the protector. And the job offer? I asked, pulling my hand away reluctantly. Is that your way of making me yours to protect? His eyes darkened at the challenge. The job is exactly what I said it is. An opportunity. What develops between us beyond that is entirely separate. He paused, then added with quiet intensity, though I won't pretend I don't hope for more. The admission hung between us, charged with possibility. I took a long sip of wine, trying to steady my racing heart. I should be getting home, I said finally. Jack will be waiting up for me. Dominic nodded, signaling for the check. Have you made a decision about the position? I had, though I wasn't entirely sure it was the right one. Yes, I said. I'll take it. When do I start? Relief and satisfaction mingled in his expression. Monday. Come to the restaurant at 4, and my manager will show you the systems, introduce you to the staff. And my notice at the diner? I'll take care of it, he said smoothly. Rosie's will understand that you've found a better opportunity. The implication that he had influence even over my current workplace was unsettling, but not entirely surprising. Dominic Castellano's reach clearly extended throughout the city. He insisted on driving me home himself, dismissing the car and driver who'd brought me to the restaurant. His own vehicle was a sleek black Aston Martin that purred to life beneath his touch. As we drove through the nighttime streets, the city lights painting streaks of color across the windshield, I felt as though I were being carried further and further from the life I'd known, toward something both alluring and dangerous. When we pulled up in front of my building, Dominic cut the engine but made no move to get out. In the intimate confines of the car, his presence seemed to fill all available space, making it difficult to breathe. "Thank you for dinner," I said, my voice sounding strangely distant to my own ears. "And for the opportunity." "Thank you for accepting both," he replied, his voice low. He turned toward me slightly, one hand coming up to brush a strand of hair from my face, his fingers lingering against my cheek. The touch was gentle but sent sparks racing across my skin. I knew I should pull away, should thank him again and exit the car, maintain some professional boundary between us if I was going to work for him. Instead, I found myself leaning into his touch, my eyes closing briefly as his palm cupped my cheek. When I opened them again, his face was closer, his eyes asking a silent question. I gave an almost imperceptible nod, and then his lips were on mine, soft at first, then more insistent as I responded. The kiss deepened, his hand sliding to the back of my neck, drawing me closer. I leaned into him, my own hands coming up to rest against his chest, feeling the solid warmth of him beneath the expensive fabric of his suit. It had been so long since I'd been touched like this, desired like this, and my body responded with a hunger that shocked me. When we finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, I saw a flash of something possessive and triumphant in his eyes. It brought me sharply back to reality. Who he was, who I was, the power imbalance between us. "I should go," I whispered, my voice unsteady. "Jack's waiting." Dominic nodded, though his hand lingered at the nape of my neck for another moment before falling away. "I'll see you Monday, Ellie." I gathered my composure as best I could, straightening my dress and reaching for the door handle. "Monday," I confirmed, then added impulsively, "Thank you, Dominic, for everything." His smile in response was genuine, softening the hard edges of his face. "It's only the beginning, Ellie, I promise you that." As I made my way up to my apartment, I could feel his eyes following me, watching until I was safely inside. The weight of that gaze felt simultaneously like protection and possession, a distinction I was no longer sure I could clearly define. Mrs. Petrovich was dozing in my armchair, a mystery novel open on her lap. She woke as I entered, her eyes immediately scanning my slightly disheveled appearance and flushed cheeks. "Good evening?" she asked with poorly disguised curiosity. "Very nice, thank you," I replied, deliberately vague. "How was Jack?" "Angel, as always, sleeping now." She gathered her things, eyes still assessing me. "Your friend? He is very handsome man. Important man, yes?" "Yes," I admitted, seeing no point in denying what she'd clearly already determined. "He's offered me a job at his restaurant." Her eyes widened with interest. "Better than diner?" "Much better." She patted my arm approvingly. "Good. You work too hard for too little." At the door, she paused. "Be careful, Ellie. Men like that, powerful men, they take what they want." I forced a smile. "I'll be fine, Mrs. Petrovich. But thank you for your concern." After she left, I checked on Jack, finding him peacefully asleep, clutching his Spider-Man figure. I brushed a kiss against his forehead, inhaling the sweet scent of his shampoo, grounding myself in the reminder of what mattered most. In my bedroom, I changed out of my dress and carefully hung it back in the closet. As I washed my face, removing the last traces of makeup, I stared at my reflection in the mirror. I looked different somehow, my eyes brighter, cheeks still flushed from Dominic's kiss, a new awareness in my expression. My phone buzzed on the nightstand with a text. "Sleep well, Ellie. I'm looking forward to having you at Castellanos." I stared at the message, understanding the dual meaning. He was looking forward to me working at his restaurant, yes, but also to having me in his world, his orbit. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, as I crawled into bed, I found myself anticipating Monday with a mixture of anxiety and excitement. Dominic Castellano had offered me more than just a job. He'd offered a glimpse of a different life, one where Jack and I weren't always struggling, always one mishap away from disaster. A life where I might find not just security, but also passion, desire, connection. The price of that life remained to be seen. As I drifted toward sleep, I wondered if it was one I could afford to pay, or more disturbingly, if it was one I was already willing to pay. Monday arrived with alarming speed. The weekend passed in a blur of routine activities with Jack, each moment tinged with the knowledge that everything was about to change. I hadn't heard from Dominic since his goodnight text on Friday, and I vacillated between relief and a disturbing sense of disappointment each time I checked my silent phone. By 4 o'clock Monday afternoon, I stood outside Castellanos, gathering my courage before entering. The restaurant was housed in a beautifully restored brownstone, its exterior elegant but understated, a small brass plaque the only indication of what lay within. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the heavy wooden door. The interior was a study in old-world luxury, rich mahogany, soft lighting from crystal sconces, white tablecloths over tables spaced far enough apart to ensure privacy. A young woman approached me immediately, her smile professional. "May I help you?" "I'm Ellie Reeves. I'm starting as the new hostess today." Recognition dawned in her eyes. "Of course, Ms. Reeves. Mr. Castellano mentioned you would be joining us. I'm Sophia, one of the servers. Marco is expecting you. He's our manager." She led me through the empty dining room to a small office in the back. Marco, a distinguished man in his 50s with silver temples and an impeccable suit, rose from his desk as we entered. "Ms. Reeves, welcome." His handshake was firm, his assessment of me swift and thorough. "Mr. Castellano speaks highly of you." The knowledge that Dominic had discussed me with his staff sent a flush to my cheeks. "Thank you. I'm looking forward to learning the ropes." "Sophia will show you the reservation system and explain your duties," Marco said. "The uniform is simple. Black dress, similar to what you're wearing now, is perfect. We provide a tablet for managing the floor and a communication device to stay in contact with the kitchen and staff." For the next hour, Sophia guided me through the sophisticated reservation system, explaining the intricate hierarchy of table assignments, which regulars preferred, which tables, which areas were reserved for special guests, which servers were assigned to which sections. It was far more complex than the first-come, first-served approach at the diner. "The most important thing to remember," Sophia said in a lowered voice as we stood by the host stand, "is that some of Mr. Castellano's personal guests require extra attention and privacy. Marco will let you know who they are. They don't need reservations, and they always get priority seating." I nodded, understanding the subtext. Castellano's served dual purposes: a legitimate high-end restaurant for the public, and occasionally a meeting place for Dominic's other associates. By 5 o'clock, the rest of the staff had arrived, and Sophia introduced me around. The servers were professional and welcoming, if a bit reserved. I got the impression they were waiting to see how long I would last before fully accepting me into their ranks. "Mr. Castellano usually arrives around 7, Sophia informed me, as the first customers began to trickle in. "He has a private table in the back when he dines here." I nodded, simultaneously anticipating and dreading seeing Dominic again. The memory of our kiss in his car had replayed in my mind countless times over the weekend, each recollection sending a flush of heat through my body. The evening progressed smoothly. I shadowed Sophia for the first 2 hours, learning how she greeted guests, managed the flow of the dining room, and coordinated with the kitchen. By 7, I was handling some of the duties myself, welcoming diners and escorting them to their tables. The work was straightforward enough, though I was acutely aware of the caliber of clientele: city officials, local celebrities, wealthy business owners. A stark contrast to the working-class customers at Rosie's Diner. At precisely 7:15, the atmosphere in the restaurant shifted subtly. Staff members straightened, conversations quieted, and all eyes drifted toward the entrance. I turned to see Dominic standing in the doorway, his presence commanding attention without effort. He wore another impeccable suit, this one charcoal gray, his hair perfectly styled, his expression inscrutable as his eyes scanned the room, finally landing on me. I forced my professional smile to remain in place as he approached the host stand, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. "Mr. Castellano," I greeted him, proud of how steady my voice sounded. "Good evening." His lips curved into a slight smile, his eyes warming as they held mine. "Ms. Reeves, how is your first night going?" "Very well, thank you. Sophia has been an excellent guide." He nodded approvingly. "I'll be in my usual table tonight. I have guests arriving at 8. I'll make sure everything is prepared," I promised. He lingered a moment longer than necessary, his eyes conveying messages that his professional demeanor couldn't. Then, with a slight nod, he moved toward the back of the restaurant, several staff members nodding deferentially as he passed. Sophia appeared at my elbow. "He likes you," she whispered. I kept my expression neutral. "He's just checking on the new employee." She gave me a knowing look, but said nothing more. The evening progressed at a steady pace. At 8, Dominic's guests arrived. 3 serious-looking men in expensive suits who were immediately escorted to his private table. I noticed that servers approached the table less frequently than others, giving them space for what appeared to be an intense conversation. At 10:30, as the dinner service began winding down, Marco approached me. "Mr. Castellano would like to see you in his office before you leave tonight." My stomach tightened with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. Of course. The last hour of my shift passed in a blur of final reservations and departing guests. By 11:15, the dining room was empty except for a few lingering couples. Sophia squeezed my arm as she prepared to leave. "You did great tonight," she said with genuine warmth. "See you tomorrow?" I nodded, returning her smile. "Definitely." Marco gestured toward a hallway beyond the private dining area. "Mr. Castellano's office is at the end. He's expecting you." The hallway was dimly lit, the thick carpet muffling my footsteps as I approached the door at the end. I took a deep breath before knocking softly. "Come in," Dominic's voice called from within. His office was surprisingly understated. A large desk of dark wood, comfortable leather chairs, walls lined with bookshelves. A small bar occupied one corner, crystal decanters catching the light from the desk lamp. Dominic stood as I entered, coming around the desk to greet me. "Ellie," he said, his voice warmer now that we were alone. "How was your first night?" "Good," I replied honestly. "Your staff is very professional, and the systems are straightforward enough to learn." "And were you comfortable? No issues?" I shook my head. "None. Everyone was helpful." He gestured to a chair. "Please, sit. Would you like a drink? You must be tired." "Just water, thank you," I said, lowering myself into the chair. My feet were aching after hours in heels, a reminder of how different this job was from waitressing. Dominic poured water for me, and an amber liquid I assumed was whiskey for himself. As he handed me the glass, his fingers brushed mine deliberately, sending that now familiar current of electricity up my arm. "You fit in well here," he said, leaning against his desk rather than returning to his chair, his position placing him close enough that I could detect the subtle scent of his cologne. "Marco was impressed with how quickly you adapted." "Thank you." I took a sip of water, using the moment to compose myself. "I'm grateful for the opportunity." His eyes studied me with an intensity that made my skin warm. "How is Jack adjusting to your new schedule?" The question surprised me. I hadn't expected him to bring up my son so immediately. "He's fine. Mrs. Chen picked him up from school and will watch him until I get home." He was excited about my fancy new job, as he called it. A smile touched Dominic's lips. "Smart kid. He takes after his mother." The compliment hung in the air between us, charged with meaning I wasn't sure I was ready to acknowledge. "Dominic," I began hesitantly. "I need to be clear about something." He raised an eyebrow, waiting. I took a deep breath. "I appreciate this job, more than I can express, but I need to establish some boundaries if this is going to work. Whatever is developing between us personally can't interfere with my professional position here." His expression gave away nothing. "What exactly are you worried about, Ellie?" "That other staff will think I received special treatment," I said carefully. or that my continued employment depends on personal factors. Understanding dawned in his eyes. You think I would fire you if you refused my advances? Put so bluntly, it sounded both calculating and insulting. I didn't mean— Yes, you did, he interrupted, but his tone remained mild. And it's a reasonable concern, given the power imbalance between us. He set his glass down and moved to sit in the chair beside me, bringing us to eye level. So, let me be perfectly clear. Your position here is secure based on your performance alone. If you decide that you want nothing more than a professional relationship between us, I will respect that choice completely. Relief washed through me, followed quickly by confusion at my own mixed feelings. Did I want him to back off? The memory of his kiss suggested otherwise. Thank you, I said softly. I have Jack to consider, and this job means financial security we haven't had in years. Dominic nodded. I understand. He paused, then added in a lower tone, but I won't pretend I'm not attracted to you, Ellie, or that I don't want to pursue whatever this is between us. I just won't make it a condition of your employment. The honesty was disarming. Most men would have either become defensive or immediately backed away. Dominic did neither, instead, acknowledging both the reality of our situation and his own desires. I don't know what I want, I admitted, surprising myself with the confession. This is all happening so fast. He smiled slightly. Then we take it slow, get to know each other, see where it leads. I nodded, relief mingling with a strange disappointment. I should get home to Jack, of course. He stood, extending a hand to help me up. I've arranged for a car service to take you home each night after your shift. It's not safe for you to be using public transportation so late. I opened my mouth to protest, then closed it again. The subway at this hour was indeed risky, and I couldn't afford regular taxis. Thank you, I said instead. As I gathered my purse, Dominic moved slightly closer, his presence overwhelming in the confined space of the office. May I? He asked softly, his intention clear in his eyes. I hesitated only briefly before nodding. He leaned down, his lips meeting mine in a kiss that was gentle, but thorough, his hand coming up to cup my cheek. Unlike our first kiss in the car, this one felt less urgent, more like a promise of things to come. When he pulled back, his eyes were darker, more intense. Good night, Ellie, he murmured. Good night, I whispered back, my voice not entirely steady. The car he'd arranged was waiting outside, a discreet black sedan with a professional driver who opened the door for me without comment. As we drove through the nighttime streets, I leaned my head back against the seat, trying to process everything that had happened. In less than a week, my entire life had transformed, from struggling waitress to hostess at an exclusive restaurant, from alone to whatever I was with Dominic. The next few weeks fell into a new routine. I worked Tuesday through Saturday nights at Castellanos, quickly learning the intricacies of the position. During the days, I spent precious time with Jack, who thrived with our new schedule that allowed me to pick him up from school myself and help with homework before Mrs. Chen took over in the evenings. My relationship with Dominic evolved cautiously. He was at the restaurant most nights, but kept our interactions professional in front of the staff. Occasionally, he would ask me to stay after closing for a drink in his office, where conversation flowed more easily between us. I learned about his childhood in a family where loyalty was paramount and vulnerability was weakness, about his ambitions to expand the legitimate side of his businesses, about his complicated relationship with his late father. In turn, I shared stories of my life with Jack, my dreams for his future, even painful memories of his father's betrayal. Each night ended with increasingly passionate kisses that left us both wanting more. But Dominic never pushed beyond that boundary, respecting the pace I'd set. The restraint he showed only intensified the attraction building between us. 1 month into my new job, Dominic invited me to dinner at his home on my night off. Bring Jack, he suggested, surprising me. My chef makes excellent pizza, and I have a theater room with every superhero movie ever made. The invitation marked a significant shift in our relationship, meeting my son in a personal context, opening his home to us. After careful consideration, I accepted. Dominic's house was exactly what I'd expected, and nothing like I'd imagined. The security was extensive, a gated entrance with armed guards, surveillance cameras, a long driveway leading to a sprawling mansion set on manicured grounds. But inside, rather than the cold opulence I'd anticipated, I found warmth. Comfortable furniture designed for living, not just for show, artwork that spoke of personal taste rather than investment value, and a kitchen that was clearly the heart of the home. Jack was initially shy, clinging to my hand as we entered, but Dominic approached him with a natural ease that surprised me. "I hear you're still a Spider-Man fan," he said, crouching down to Jack's level. "I've got something to show you." He led us to what he called the theater room, a home cinema with plush seating and a screen that covered an entire wall. One corner of the room housed a glass display case containing vintage comic books and action figures. Jack's eyes widened to saucers. "Whoa, is that a real Spider-Man comic?" "Issue number 1, Dominic confirmed, unlocking the case and carefully removing the plastic-protected comic. From 1963. As Jack examined the comic with reverent hands under Dominic's guidance, I watched the interaction with a strange tightness in my chest. My son was looking at Dominic with undisguised admiration, and Dominic was treating him with a gentle patience I hadn't expected. The evening progressed with homemade pizza in the theater room while watching the first Spider-Man movie. Jack, initially reserved, gradually warmed to Dominic, bombarding him with questions about the comics and the films. By the time the credits rolled, Jack had migrated from my side to sit next to Dominic, eagerly pointing out his favorite scenes. "It's past your bedtime, buddy," I said, when I noticed Jack fighting to keep his eyes open around 10 o'clock. "But Mom," he protested sleepily, "we haven't watched the second one yet." "Another time," Dominic promised, ruffling Jack's hair in a gesture that looked surprisingly natural. "The movies aren't going anywhere." To my amazement, Jack allowed Dominic to carry him to the car when he became too tired to walk. As Dominic gently settled my half-asleep son into the back seat, he met my eyes over Jack's head, something vulnerable and questioning in his gaze. "Thank you for tonight," I said softly. "He had a wonderful time." "So did I," Dominic replied, his voice equally quiet. "You've raised an incredible kid, Ellie." The ride home was silent, Jack sleeping against my shoulder, and Dominic's driver navigating the nighttime streets with practiced ease. When we arrived at my apartment building, Dominic insisted on carrying Jack upstairs, gently laying him on his bed while I removed his shoes and covered him with a blanket. In the dim light of my living room, Dominic looked out of place yet strangely right, his expensive suit contrasting with my shabby furniture, but his presence filling the space with a warmth it had lacked for too long. "Would you like some tea?" I offered, suddenly reluctant for the evening to end. "I'd like that," he said, loosening his tie and taking a seat on my worn couch. As I moved around the small kitchen, preparing 2 cups of tea, I felt his eyes following me. When I returned to the living room, he accepted the cup with a smile that transformed his usually serious face. "You're not what I expected, Dominic Castellano," I said, settling beside him on the couch. "What did you expect?" he asked, genuine curiosity in his tone. I considered my answer carefully. Someone colder, more calculating, less human. He chuckled, the sound rich and rare. "And what am I instead?" "Complicated," I said honestly. "You're someone who pays for a little boy's birthday cake 1 minute and intimidates powerful men the next. You run businesses I probably don't want to know the details of, but you also remember what kind of superhero my son likes and treat him with real kindness." Dominic set his cup down on the coffee table, turning toward me fully. "The world isn't black and white, Ellie. I learned that lesson early. My father built his empire through fear and violence. I've tried to be more selective in how I use power." "But you still use it," I pointed out quietly. "Yes." He didn't deny it or make excuses. "I protect what's mine. I honor my obligations. I don't hurt the innocent." He paused. "But I'm not a good man, not by conventional standards. I won't pretend otherwise." The honesty was stark, almost brutal, but I appreciated it more than false reassurances would have been. "And what am I to you?" I asked, the question that had been haunting me for weeks finally finding voice. "What is this between us?" Dominic reached out, taking my hand in his, his thumb tracing gentle circles on my palm. "Something I didn't expect," he admitted. "I was intrigued by you from the moment I saw you in that bakery. Your pride, your love for your son, your refusal to accept charity, even when it would have been easier." His eyes held mine, intense and unwavering. "But now, it's more than intrigue, Ellie. I care about you, about Jack. I want you both in my life." The admission hung in the air between us, weighted with implications neither of us had fully explored. Being in Dominic Castellano's life meant more than just a relationship. It meant entering his world completely, with all its complexity and danger. "I'm scared," I confessed, my voice barely above a whisper. "Not of you, but of what this could mean for Jack. For me." "You should be," he said, surprising me with his candor. "My world isn't safe, Ellie, but I swear to you, I would do everything in my power to keep you and Jack protected." I believed him. That was the most frightening part. I truly believed that this man, with his dangerous connections and complicated morality, would move heaven and earth to protect us if we became his. "I need time," I said finally, "to be sure this is right for Jack." "For me," Dominic nodded, lifting my hand to press a kiss against my palm, the gesture startlingly tender. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." But time, as it turned out, wasn't on our side. 3 days later, as I was preparing to leave for work, there was a sharp knock at my apartment door. When I opened it, I found 2 uniformed police officers standing in the hallway. "Ellie Reeves?" the older officer asked, his expression grave. "Yes," I replied, a chill of foreboding washing over me. "What's wrong?" "We need to speak with you regarding your employment at Castellano's restaurant," he said. "May we come in?" I stepped aside numbly, allowing them into my small living room. Jack was at Mrs. Chen's for the afternoon, thankfully. "What is this about?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. The younger officer remained standing while his partner took a seat on my couch. "Ms. Reeves, we're investigating Dominic Castellano for money laundering, racketeering, and other organized crime activities. We have reason to believe the restaurant is being used to clean illegal funds." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "I just work there as a hostess," I said carefully. "I've only been employed there for a month." "We understand that," the officer replied. "But we also have information suggesting your relationship with Castellano may be personal in nature." Heat rushed to my face. "My personal life isn't relevant to whatever investigation you're conducting." "It is if Castellano is using you," the younger officer interjected, "setting you up as a patsy if things go south." Anger flared within me. "That's absurd. I know nothing about the financial operations of the restaurant." The seated officer leaned forward. "Ms. Reeves, we're not here to accuse you of anything. In fact, we believe you may be an unwitting participant in Castellano's operations. We're here to offer you protection and an opportunity." "What opportunity?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Become an informant," he said bluntly. "Wear a wire. Give us access to Castellano's office. In exchange, we ensure your complete immunity from any charges, plus relocation and new identities for you and your son when it's over." The suggestion hit me like a physical blow. They were asking me to betray Dominic, to use his feelings for me to gather evidence against him. "No," I said immediately. "Absolutely not." The officers exchanged glances. "Ms. Reeves, I don't think you understand the seriousness of the situation. Castellano is dangerous. When he discovers we've approached you, and he will, your life could be in danger." "Dominic would never hurt me," I said with absolute certainty. "Maybe not physically," the younger officer conceded. "But what happens to your job when he can't trust you anymore? What happens to your son's security? The fancy new life you've been building?" The implied threat wasn't subtle. They were telling me that even if I refused to cooperate, they would make sure Dominic knew about their visit, destroying my relationship with him either way. "I think you should leave," I said, standing and moving toward the door. "I have nothing else to say." The older officer handed me a card. "Think it over, Ms. Reeves. Call that number when you change your mind, for your son's sake, if not your own." After they left, I sank onto the couch, my hands trembling violently. I should have known it was too good to be true. The job, the security, Dominic's interest in me. Now it was all crumbling, and I had no idea what to do next. My first instinct was to call Dominic, to warn him, but I hesitated. What if the officers were right? What if he had been using me all along? What if I was just a convenient front, a respectable face for his criminal enterprises? But then I remembered the way he'd looked at Jack, the gentleness in his hands as he'd carried my sleeping son to bed, the vulnerability in his eyes when he'd confessed his feelings for me. That wasn't calculation or manipulation. That was real. With shaking fingers, I dialed his number. He answered on the second ring. "Ellie," he said, his voice warm. "I was just thinking about you." "Dominic," I said, my voice breaking slightly. "We need to talk. Now." Something in my tone must have alerted him. "What's wrong? Are you and Jack okay?" "We're fine, but the police were just here. About you. About the restaurant." There was a long silence then. "Don't say anything more on the phone. I'll be there in 20 minutes. True to his word. Exactly 20 minutes later, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, Dominic stood in the hallway, his expression tight with concern. He was alone. No bodyguards, no driver, which surprised me given the circumstances. As soon as the door closed behind him, he pulled me into his arms, holding me tightly against his chest. I hadn't realized how badly I needed that physical reassurance until I felt it, my body relaxing fractionally in his embrace. "Tell me everything," he said, when he finally released me, leading me to the couch where we sat close together, his hand still holding mine. I recounted the entire conversation with the police officers, watching his expression darken as I explained their proposition. "I told them no," I finished, "but they made it clear they'd make sure you knew they'd approached me either way. They want to destroy your trust in me." Dominic was silent for a long moment, his jaw tight, eyes distant as he processed the information. Finally, he turned to me. "Do you trust me, Ellie?" The question was loaded with meaning. "Yes," I said without hesitation, surprising myself with the certainty of it. "I do." He nodded once, decision made. "Then I need you to pack a bag for yourself and Jack. Essential items only. We need to leave immediately." Alarm flickered through me. "Leave? Where are we going?" "Somewhere safe," he said, already pulling out his phone. "The police showing up here means they're moving on their investigation. My sources inside the department haven't warned me, which means this is coming from federal level, FBI most likely. We need to get ahead of this." My mind raced with implications. "Jack is at Mrs. Chen's. I need to get him." "I'll send someone you trust," Dominic said, already dialing. "Marco from the restaurant. He'll bring Jack to us directly." As Dominic made arrangements in rapid-fire Italian, I moved mechanically to my bedroom, pulling out a duffel bag and filling it with clothes, toiletries, Jack's medications, and his favorite Spider-Man toy. My hands shook as I packed, the reality of what was happening finally sinking in. I was choosing Dominic, choosing to trust him completely, to place not just my safety but Jack's in his hands. When I returned to the living room, Dominic was ending his call. "Marco will be at Mrs. Chen's in 10 minutes. He'll tell her there's a family emergency, and you've sent him to collect Jack. He'll meet us at the safe house." "Safe house," I repeated numbly. This is really happening. Dominic crossed to me, taking my face in his hands. "Ellie, listen to me. I can protect you and Jack, but only if you do exactly as I say. Do you understand?" I nodded. "I understand. This won't be forever," he promised. "Just until I can resolve the situation." I have contingency plans for this exact scenario. Of course he did, I thought. A man in his position would always have escape routes planned. We left through the service entrance of my building, avoiding the main lobby where cameras might record our departure. Dominic's car, not his usual Aston Martin but a nondescript sedan, was waiting in the alley behind the building. The driver, a man I recognized as one of his security team, nodded once as we approached. As we drove through the city, taking a circuitous route to avoid potential surveillance, I felt strangely calm. I had made my choice, not just to trust Dominic, but to align myself with him completely. There was no going back now. The safe house turned out to be a luxurious apartment in a high-security building across town. Marco was already there with Jack, who looked confused but excited by what had been described to him as a surprise adventure. "Mom," he exclaimed when we entered, running to hug me. Marco says we're staying in a special place for a while, like a vacation. I forced a smile, kneeling to his level. That's right, baby. We're going to be staying somewhere new for a little bit. An adventure with Dominic. Jack's eyes lit up. Like at his movie theater? Will we watch more Spider-Man? Absolutely, Dominic promised, his hand resting reassuringly on Jack's shoulder. We'll have movie nights and whatever else you want. As Marco and the security team secured the apartment, Dominic led us on a tour. 3 bedrooms, a spacious living area, a fully stocked kitchen. It was comfortable, luxurious even. But I couldn't shake the knowledge that it was also a cage, gilded though it might be. After getting Jack settled with a movie in the living room, Dominic pulled me into the master bedroom, closing the door behind us. I need to go out for a few hours, he said, his voice low. To meet with my lawyers and handle some arrangements. You'll be safe here. There are men I trust with my life guarding this building. Fear gripped me again. When will you be back? Before morning, he promised. And then we'll talk about our next steps. He paused, his eyes searching mine. I'm sorry to have pulled you into this, Ellie. This isn't what I wanted for you and Jack. I made my choice, I said firmly. I chose you, Dominic. I just need to know one thing, anything. Are they right? About the money laundering through the restaurant? He didn't hesitate. Yes. The admission was stark, unapologetic. But not in the way they think. I've been working to separate my legitimate businesses from the family's other interests. The restaurant is part of that transition. I nodded, accepting the truth of who he was, what he did. And us? Was any of that real, or was I just a convenient cover? Dominic's expression softened, his hands coming up to cradle my face. Ellie, nothing about my feelings for you or Jack has been false. If anything, you've been the most real thing in my life in years. His thumbs brushed my cheeks gently. I love you. Both of you. I should have told you sooner, but I didn't want to rush you. The declaration stole my breath. Love. Such a simple word for the complex emotions between us. I love you too, I whispered, the truth of it washing through me, and I'm afraid that makes me crazy. He smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. Then we're crazy together. He kissed me deeply, pouring everything he couldn't say into the connection between us. When he finally pulled back, his expression had turned serious again. I'll fix this, Ellie. I promise. After Dominic left, I spent the evening with Jack, maintaining a facade of normalcy as we watched movies, ordered pizza, and explored our temporary home. When he finally fell asleep in one of the guest bedrooms, I sat in the living room alone, staring out at the city lights, wondering how my life had led me to this moment. It was nearly 3 a.m. when I heard the front door open. I turned to see Dominic entering, looking exhausted but determined. He came to me immediately, sitting beside me on the couch and taking my hands in his. It's handled, he said simply. My lawyers have been in contact with the federal prosecutor. We've reached an agreement. What kind of agreement? I asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. I'm going to testify against several higher-level figures in exchange for immunity on the lesser charges, he explained. It means dismantling parts of my family's organization, but it also means a fresh start for all of us. The implications were staggering. You're turning state's witness? Isn't that dangerous? Extremely, he admitted. Which is why we'll be entering witness protection afterward. New identities, new location, new life. He squeezed my hands gently. I know it's a lot to ask, but I want you and Jack to come with me. To be my family. My heart stuttered in my chest. Your family? Dominic reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. I had this with me the night we had dinner at my house. I've been carrying it ever since, waiting for the right moment. He opened the box to reveal a stunning diamond ring. I know the timing is terrible, and I'm asking you to give up everything. Your home, your identity, to be with me. But I love you, Ellie. I love Jack. And I want to build a life with you both. Tears welled in my eyes as I looked at the ring, at this man who had transformed my life in just a few short weeks. You want to marry me? More than anything, he said softly. Not just for protection or convenience, but because I can't imagine my life without you in it anymore. In that moment, I saw our future unfold before me. A new beginning, far from here, where Dominic would no longer be a feared mafia boss but simply a man, my husband, Jack's stepfather. A normal life, or as normal as it could be given the circumstances. "Yes," I whispered, my decision made. "Yes, I'll marry you." His face transformed with a joy I'd never seen in him before, vulnerability and hope replacing the guarded calculation I'd grown accustomed to. He slipped the ring onto my finger, a perfect fit, before pulling me into his arms. "I'll keep you both safe," he promised against my hair, "whatever it takes." "I know you will," I said, believing it completely. 6 months later, in a small ceremony attended only by federal marshals as witnesses, I became Ellie Castellano. 2 days after that, we boarded a private plane to our new home, a coastal town thousands of miles away where no one knew us, where Dominic Romano, his new identity, was simply a successful restaurant consultant, his criminal past erased from all records. Jack, now going by a new name as well, adapted to our new life with the resilience of childhood, quickly making friends at his new school, and thriving under the constant presence of a father figure who adored him. The first time he called Dominic Dad, I saw tears in my husband's eyes, the final wall around his heart crumbling completely. Our house by the sea became a true home, filled with laughter and love. Dominic used his business acumen to open a small restaurant that quickly became the town's favorite, while I discovered a talent for interior design, eventually starting my own modest business. Sometimes, in quiet moments when Dominic thought I wasn't watching, I'd catch a faraway look in his eyes, remembering his old life, perhaps, or the power he'd wielded. But it never lasted long, always replaced by contentment when he looked at Jack playing in the yard, or at me across the dinner table. One evening, as we sat on our porch watching the sunset over the ocean, Jack asleep inside after an exhausting day of swimming, Dominic turned to me. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked softly. "Giving up everything for this life with me?" I thought about the question seriously, about all we'd left behind, my humble apartment, his empire, our identities. Then I looked at our beautiful home, thought of our son sleeping peacefully inside, and the man beside me who had risked everything for a chance at redemption. "Never," I said honestly, taking his hand in mine. "I didn't give up anything that matters. Everything I need is right here." He smiled, that rare, genuine smile that still made my heart race, and pulled me close. As the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, I realized that sometimes love arrives in the most unexpected packages, even in the form of a mafia boss who buys a birthday cake for a little boy he doesn't know, setting in motion a chain of events that leads to the kind of happiness I'd stopped believing was possible. And I wouldn't change a single moment of it.